text field. Wow. We've also set our view controller to be a text field delegate. Wow. And then we set up one of that protocol's methods. So we implemented a function that gets called when a text field returns. But this function won't work on our specific text field unless we set its delegate to be this view controller. We did all that. Nice. Let's see what happens next. Set up your UI. When the user types in a guess into the text field and hits return, so we've got that function set up. Let's keep going. They get a message if their guess was correct or had any errors, and then it gets added to the appropriate spot in the UI. So let's talk about this. What do we think this phrase, the appropriate spot in the UI, is referring to? It's going to talk about a couple different places. So, hi Ellen. Hi. So, based on what we have here, we want to deal with correct or incorrect places. When something's correct, where is it going to go? It's going to go in one of the boxes. So let's set up these boxes. I think it says that these boxes are supposed to be for 3, 4, and 5 letter words. I'm sorry, 3, 4, 5, and 6. Thank you. So let's set up an outlet to each of them with that precise descriptor. So this is the 3 letters text view. What should this one be called? Oh, I love it. So we're going to call this one the 4. We could do it in a collection, and we can also refactor our code later to be in a collection. But for right now, I want to just be very, I want to be verbal about it. But a collection might be really helpful here as well. Let's do it right now so we can talk about each of these text views individually. Let me see. Jocelyn, what do you want to call this outlet? So this top one was the 3 letters text view. This was the 4 letters text view. What do you want to call this one? I love it. 5 letters text view. Awesome. And then Carrie, this last text view, what should we call it? Cool. I'm going to call it something a little differently, just so I keep my pattern. This is the 6 letters text view. Shut up. Shut up, truck. Great. So we've got our 4 text views. In each of those text views, if the guess was correct, it gets added to the appropriate spot in the UI. So when a user hits return, which is this function that we got from our protocol, we need to do some stuff. The first stuff we're going to do is we are going to see if the guess is correct. That's probably going to be a function that we use in here based on the text field's text. So we're going to look at text field.text. That works for me. That makes sense to me. Look at text field.text. Then, based on whether it's correct or not, what should we expect the type of response of that to be? If it's correct or not, EULA. That's great, I love it. So our response is a bool. So we can probably just set up a condition based on the response. So if the return of this whole function that checks if the guess is correct, if that happens, we, if true, give a message that they were correct, and then add that guess into the appropriate text view. So these are the text views for 3, 4, 5, and 6 letter words. How are we going to determine which text view to put it in? Aaron.
You can assign based on the statement, if word count, and let's say if there's 3, then we say that
Nice. So I just rephrased what you said a little bit. We're going to check. So we're going to have some conditionals in there that check the length of the word, and then add or append that word, depending on how we want to do it, to the text view. Nice. So that's if there's a correct guess. What about if there's an incorrect guess? Are we going to add it to a text view? Cool. So it's actually, I would say if you are kind of pseudocoding like this or writing out your instructions, also be sure to tell yourself what you shouldn't do. It's a helpful hint if you go to sleep and try to do it 3 days later. So don't update the text views with the guess. What should we, is it raining? Is that window? Sounds and looks like it. Okay. Don't update the text views with the guess, but what should you show to the user, Sunny? Okay. So do update the label. Cool. What should that label say? Nice. Never give up. Awesome. Phoenix. Cool. So we don't want this label to do all the work. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah.
Cool. So let's add another label. That makes sense to me. How can I get a label out? Liana. Are you playing alone? Okay. Liana. So Phoenix had a great suggestion. This label might have to do a whole bunch of things, which would be really obnoxious. And maybe we want to just add another label that tells us specifically what happened with the guess. So how can I add another label to my view controller? Nice. Oh, there it is. Okay. I'm going to put it below the text view. And I just noticed that our labels are not hooked up yet. So I'm going to create outlets. This outlet from the bottom label, its job is going to be to, let's say, take care of it's going to tell us what happened with someone's guess. So, Tia, what can I call this outlet? Any old thing. And let's get a more descriptive one, because any old thing could be any old thing. Sorry, yeah. So this label's job is going to be to display to us the result of someone's guess. Exactly. Sorry? User guess message. I like it. And I'm just going to say user guess message label. So that when I refer to that variable in other places in my code, I'll know that it's the label that I'm talking about. Then this top label, Phoenix, can you tell me what we want the job of this one to be based on your very good advice? So what if I call it show available letters label? Does that sound good? Great. Thank you. So we've got our labels now. What should I do now? Oh my God, I agree. I'm going to commit my changes. So let's check our git status. I'm going to git add the main.storyboard. Then I'm going to git add -p to just add those outlets. Cool. So when I added the storyboard, what I neglected to do was maybe make commits for the text views and the labels separately. Let's be lazy right now. And I'm just going to skip the rest of this stuff because we're just talking about what's going on. And I'm going to commit it as creates outlets. It's a really bad commit message, right? I might have wanted to do this at a separate time. Oh well. So let's go back to what we were doing in this hit return thing. Now we're going to start interacting with our model. I'm just going to go to our view controller. We don't even need the UI right now because we're talking about the interaction of our controller and our model now. So what we said was, when a user hits enter, that's what's happening in the view. The controller has now been notified about it. We are now going to set up the interaction between the controller and the model. We don't even need to worry about the view because the controller has separated the view and the model. So our model doesn't even know what the situation was. Our model doesn't know that the user hit enter. Our model just knows that the controller is asking it for some information or to do some stuff. They have to be that separate. The view should never be interacting with the model. So in our function here, we said that a bunch of stuff is going to go on. We're going to see if the guess is correct. We're going to look at text field's text. Based on whether it's correct or not, we're going to type a bool. Based on whether it's correct or not, so we're going to check the bool, like, does this match maybe one of the words in my model? If it's true, give a message that they're correct and then add that word into the appropriate text view. We'll probably determine which text view that is based on the word count. Then we will add or append it to the appropriate text view. If the guess is incorrect, don't update the text views, but update the label saying your guess was incorrect, but never give up. All right. Before we do any of this, what do we need in our controller? We need an instance of something. Can you tell me, Albert? Cool. So we need to make an instance of our model that we're going to use. I'm going to say we only need to use word data here. Word data is a struct that contains in it 3 test twist info objects. So it instantiates 3 and keeps them in an array called all info. So if I instantiate word data, if I make an instance of word data, then I don't need to create any test twist info because there are already 3 contained in that struct. So if I say let, what do we want to call it? How about word data equal word data? If I instantiate that, that's great. That's all I need. But what's the next step? How many different games are in word data? 3. So the next step is I'm going to need to pick which of those games we are currently playing. So let's create a function called, I'm going to make it a private function because I only want it to exist in this view controller. Private function pick new game. And I'm going to say that this returns a test twist info object. Where is this test twist info object going to get stored? Great. So we should create an instance that handles that specific case in our view controller. So I'm going to call it var current game. And I'm not going to go away. I'm going to make it optional so that I don't have to initialize a value. In a struct, I would have had to, but in a class, let's just make sure this works. Probably needs an initializer. Oh no, it's not returning. Great. So right now I'm just going to say do that. Sorry, all I'm doing is making an example to make sure that our function's going to work. Great, the build succeeded. I made current game an optional because in a class, I don't have to initialize an optional value, an optional variable with a value. So in my class here, I don't have to give current game a value when we start out, which is going to be helpful. Yes?
Question about when we initialize word data. You initialize it in this file because we're obviously going to use that in this file, but if you're using the same instance in multiple files, does it make sense to initialize it in the file that class is in? Or do you have to initialize it?
I would say it depends. So right now, we're only using it in one place, and we're going to use it in a specific way. If another file used it in that exact way, or if multiple files used it in that exact way, we might just add it in the global scope somewhere. So if you look at my pairing project, there's something I created as a helper called global. And that was just information that I wanted to be available across all files. So rather than creating an instance of word data, I knew that I was going to use that data in multiple places. So I just put it in its own place so that I could refer to it later. I would encourage you to take a look at that. Specifically for word data right now, we're creating an instance so that we can go ahead and look at different attributes, pick a random game from it. If we needed to use it in the same exact way in multiple places, I would probably set it up as something global, so in every scope. So right now, we just need it here. And that's only because what word data is ultimately doing is it's just storing info. It really doesn't have any other behavior. It doesn't get instantiated from other stuff, right? It just has one attribute. If you think about it, it only has one property, called all_info, which already has a value, which is this array of test twist info objects. So it only has one property. So what word data is really doing, its whole job is to store the data. There are no functions that you call on it, but maybe we might do stuff with all_info, which is its only property. Michelle. In the all_info. Mm-hmm. We're about to do it, and I'll show you. I think I get your question. The question is, why are we storing all of word data in our view controller as opposed to one game? So I think I've anticipated what they want us to do. They didn't really say it in the instructions super well, but they're going to want us to be able to pick between multiple games. So in all_info is multiple games. In word data.all_info are multiple games. Oh, shit. Hold on. Ah, good point. Okay. Yeah. Yeah.
As far as word data, what we were given was a class not to start. So if you change it to a class just like I feel confident or same thing.
Sure. It's a class. Same kind of thing. So I was wrong. Hold on. Yeah. Just know that they have certain ways that they don't work the same way, right? You have to initialize every property in a struct. You can leave some as optional in a class. A struct is going to use struct as a value type as opposed to a reference type. So there are certain ways that that's a problem. I wanted to go back to what I got wrong about this though, because I did get something wrong about it. What does static let do? What does that tell us? Let's say Olympia. What does this static let mean for this all_info thing? TNOs, okay. Delegation. So tell me how we would use it. So say I wanted. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So we don't use an instance of word data. I read that wrong, so I'm sorry. Instead, with the static method, all_info, we can call word data dot all_info and get back each of those games. So we don't have to do all this crap where I was going to instantiate a word data. This is going to your question, right? Okay. Yeah, that's where I was wrong. I didn't realize it was a static property, not a static method. Instead, I just get all_info, and I can look through that because it's stored on there. Sunny. I think that's a great idea. Let's make that now. If I can get my cursor back. So the question was, should the controller or the model be the thing picking out which game we're going to play. And I would argue that it should be the model making a decision, so that the model can say, hey, why don't you do me a favor and give me a new game? I'm sorry. So that the model can say to the controller, hey, here's a new game. And the controller can say, can you give me a new game? As opposed to the controller saying to the model, hey, you've got some games. I'm going to pick out of them the one that I want. So we would do this in the model so that the model knows everything it needs about itself. Yes. Yeah, the model knows everything about itself, but the controller only knows as much as it needs to about the model. So let's make another static thing. It's a static function. What do we want to call it? Ian. Let's use a verb. So I'm going to call it getGameInfo. And this is going to return, what kind of thing is this going to return? Great, so it's going to return test twist info. We only need one line of code here. What's that line of code going to be, Aaron? Let's say I want to do a random game. Okay. So let me push you a little bit. We're storing all of our game info in this all info type property or static property here. That's where we're storing all of that. That's in an array. We've dealt with arrays before. Do you know an array method to get a random element? Cool. So there is an instance method on arrays called random element. So we're going to return something dot random element. Let's figure out what that something is. Alex. Going up again. Going down a little more. I think so. Let's see. So all info, exclamation point. Let's see. Uh-oh, it doesn't like that. I don't want to do it again. Like that. I'm really scared. So why did I have to do that? What's the return type of this random element? It's an optional test twist info. So anytime you use random element in an array, it returns whatever is in that array as an optional, not as a specific thing. I think that in order to be safe and not be forced unwrapping, I'm just going to make the return type of this function a test twist info, an optional test twist info. That way, my model doesn't give you any errors. My model won't send back broken information if you want to use it. Because if I force unwrap this random element, but there's a nil value there, my model broke my app, which would fucking suck. Cool. Yes?
What would you do with static function and static array? You just do function and then array.
Not sure I understand.
Using static function, right?
Mhm.
They call it without having to initialize the variable. And,
That's correct.
so why would we initialize it?
So we are now not going to initialize it. Instead, we're just going to say, hey, do that thing on word data that's a static function that gets me back a random element. So we're going to refactor our code from before, because we being I, the collective we, I mean the royal we, was using this whole struct, or I guess, is it a class? Yeah. I was using this class incorrectly. So now we're going to refactor what's in the view controller, just using this static function. Yeah. Right?
So, when you return word data from you need word data with it, and just use all the
Let's see. Let's build it, see if it compiles. Sounds good, I guess. Let's see how it works. So, I screwed up. We don't need to create an instance of word data, but we did just create in our model, do something. And that something needs to return a test twist info. Cool. Now what can we do? Where can we get a random test twist info object? Dot. Whoa, nice. This is just calling that function, the static function that we just created. It's using that model, yeah. No, this is in the view controller now. We are trying to get a game to be the current game. Mm-hmm. So this is optional. What's something we can use to make an optional either extract the value or give it another value if it's nil? Nil coalescing, type. Let's do something really cheap. Yeah.
Why is it that we can't put a question mark on the top of there and then we gotta
Because I've said the return type has to be a test twist info. I could change it. Now it works because the return type of this is optional. So it's fine now. But I want to say that this function, in order to properly do its job, gets me a new game. So it gets me a test twist info. It's just what I want to do. We could also do it like this. Let's do this. The thing is, if test twist info gets something back from this function that's optional, then we don't know that we've assigned a game to our current game. If this function whose job it is to get back for us a game, then we don't know that we have a game when we call this pick new game function. So what I want our thing to do is to make sure that it's going to give us a game. And I'm doing this in a very cheap way where I'm just going to make something up. I'm going to say, if we couldn't get a game, just give us something with the word count 0 that has an empty string. If our model works correctly, this should never need to happen. But we need to account for it in the case that if we go to word data, someone just removed all of that data from there. So, boom. If that happens, then I don't get a random element here. So I want to make sure we have that flexibility. I know, it rules. It's awesome. All right, so now we can pick a new game. Where should we pick a new game? We're going to do it multiple times, but where should we first pick a new game? Right there in the view did load. Awesome. So let's say current game equal to pick new game. Nice. Now we've got a game. Now we need to do all this stuff when someone hits enter. Text field should return. Great, we've got a game. Now we need to start interacting with user input. So we're going to say, we're going to look at textfield.text and see if current game dot, let's see what those fields are again, words. So current game dot words contains textfield.text. So when we hit enter, we want to do a check to see if current game dot words, which is an array of strings, contains the string that is textfield.text. That's the big check that we're doing when we hit enter. And then all we have to do is react to whether or not that's true. Let's do that after lunch. What are some questions you have right now? Sunny?
I was, I guess, a little confused about why to use this versus why to use the ID action. Do I put this function into the ID action? Like I'm trying to merge the two together in my brain and differentiate.
If you have an outlet to the text field, then so long as you set its delegate to this view controller, you won't need any IB actions, because this does the same thing as that IB action. And so it'd probably be preferable to use this so that you wouldn't need an IB action for each different thing that text field does, but instead just to set the delegate, and then based on however these functions are implemented, do stuff to that text field. And then I deleted it, yes. Adam. Sorry? Okay. Rod and then Allison. In view did load, all I did was I said, when this view first loads, pick a new game. And that pick new game is a private function. Allison. Check it out. I want to fix one thing. I think it should be the responsibility of the model to make sure that it is returning a working game so that the controller doesn't have to know anything about how the model works. So I take it back, Alex. Sorry. So that when pick new game gets called, it always works. There are different ways we could handle that random element issue, but I think I like how this works better. This way, the model guarantees that every time you ask it for a new game, it works, as opposed to the controller needing to say, oh, that game didn't work, get me a new one. He was crying into his hat. Cool. I'm going to shut down the